Reflections and translations, two of our basic transformations that we're going to take a look at today. What a transformation is simply a change in an initial figure, which we will call the preimage, into a new final figure, which we will call the image. The first type of transformation we're going to look at, and there'll be 4 total, is what's called a translation. A translation simply means we slide the object vertically or horizontally, possibly both. And the key important thing we need to know is that once we move the object horizontally or vertically, the new shape, the image, is still congruent to the preimage. It's the same shape and the same size. The difference is the point xy on the coordinate plane has gone to the right A and up B. In other words, the right A shows up by adding to the x-coordinate, and the up B shows up by adding to the y-coordinate. And if we're moving left or down, we would use subtraction to go in the opposite direction. So for example, we've got this trapezoid here, and we're going to translate it 4 units left and 2 units up. That's a typo, up. So to do that, we first are going to identify some points on this trapezoid to guide us. We're going to use the vertices to help us with that. And I'm going to name the vertices A, B, C, and D. So A is currently at -1, -2. B is currently at 5, -2. C is currently at 0, -4. And D is currently at 4, -4. Now that's the preimage. The image is going to give us a new A, and the new A we designate with an apostrophe, and we read that prime. So A prime is the new A, B prime is the new B, C prime and D prime are going to be at new points. First, we're going to move 4 units to the left. That is going to take the x-coordinate and subtract 4 to move it to the left 4, because we're going the opposite direction of the number line. So for all of our x-coordinates, we're going to subtract 4 to get them. So A was at -1. -1 minus 4 is -5 for A prime. B was at 5. 5 minus 4 is 1 for B prime. C started at 0. 0 minus 4 is -4. And D started at 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. We also are going to move 2 units up, which means we need to take the y-coordinate, which tells us how far up and down to go, and move up 2 or add 2. So for A was at -2. -2 plus 2 is 0. B was at -2. -2 plus 2 is 0. C, -4. -4 plus 2 is -2. And D, -4 plus 2 is again -2. So let's plug these new points into our graph. A prime, the new A, is at -5, 0. So there's my A prime. B prime is at 1, 0. There's my new B prime. C prime is at -4, -2. And D prime is at 0, -2. And so when we connect the dots, we get our new image, our new trapezoid, translated 4 units to the left and 2 units up. The second type of transformation we're going to talk about is what's called a reflection. A reflection, as you would expect, creates a mirror image of the shape we're dealing with. It's still congruent. It's still the same shape and the same size. But now we're going to reflect our image. So for example, if we've got our coordinate plane, and we've got a point up here in the first quadrant, and we reflect it over the x-axis, so it's going to be down here, Notice the x value stays the same, but the y is now negative. So when we reflect over the x-axis, the y-coordinate is what changes and becomes negative. Similarly, if we reflected over the y-axis, let me take a similar point, and reflected it over the y-axis, notice the y stays the same when we reflect over the y-axis. It's the x that's now negative. So when we reflect over the y-axis, we get negative x comma y. And if we reflect over both the x and the y-axis, that's also sometimes called reflecting over the origin, it becomes negative x and negative y, because that's going to send it into this fourth quadrant where they're both negative. So let's take a look at a reflection example. Probably not this example, as this infant is ready to attack again his arch nemesis, his reflection. If you have kids, that's funny. All right, so we've got this triangle. We're going to do two reflections on this triangle. First, we're going to reflect it over the x-axis, and then we'll come back and do a totally new problem where we take the original triangle and reflect the original triangle over the y-axis. So first, we need some coordinate points. We'll call this triangle A, B, C. So we know A is at the point -2, -3. B is at the point 2, 3. And C is at the point 3, -1. And when we reflect over the x-axis, the y's are going to change value. So now A prime keeps the same x, -2, the -3 then becomes +3. And for the image of B, B prime, the x stays the same. The y changes to -3. And with the C, C prime, the x stays the same, and the y changes from -1 to +1. So A prime is at -2, 3. Notice that's a reflection over the x-axis. B prime is now 2, -3. And C prime is 3, 1. And so when we connect those dots, we get the new image of our triangle reflected over the x-axis. But just as well, we could have reflected it over the y-axis, and that's what I'm going to do in green here. So the original points, A was at -2, -3, B was at 2, 3, and C was at 3, -1. And we're going to reflect them over the y-axis this time. Remember, if we flip over the y-axis, the x's are what are going to change. So now A, the x changes to +2, and the y stays -3. For B, the x changes to -2, and the y stays at 3. For C, the x changes to -3, and the y stays at -1. And now I've got my new A prime, B prime, and C prime points. I'm going to call these prime prime because it's the second change. That way we don't get them confused. And I should have labeled my first graph. My A prime was at -2, 3, B prime, and my C prime. So now it's going to start to get crowded, but hopefully the colors will help. A prime prime is at 2, -3. That's A prime prime. B prime is at -2, 3. That's B prime prime. And C prime is at -3, -1. And when I connect those dots, interestingly enough, these touch each other, but that won't always happen. We end up with our reflection over the y-axis. So take a look at the homework assignment, practice some reflections, some translations. You can also do combinations of reflections and translations to figure out where your new points will end up. Take a look at the homework assignment and let your instructor know if you have any questions.